Hi guys. So when I look at the Bible, there's a lot of stuff in it that's hard for me to believe. And some of it's hard for me to really, get behind or agree with. I'd say, a lot of it, particularly in the Old Testament. But there's also a lot of stuff in there that's hard for me to disbelieve, or at least a lot of stuff in there that just rings of truth. And I think the truth contained within it is kind of hidden. And I think, for me personally, I feel you have to kind of make your own interpretation. Knowing what I know of people and the church and just the people in the church, really, I find it extremely hard to believe that the text we have now isn't heavily edited to fit people's agendas and just like largely embellished, or and I do agree with the idea that religion, like mainstream religion, has very often been used just as a means of controlling people, and certain people are very good at seizing control of things for their own agendas. Anyway, so I try to just look at what I see as like the core truths, and in fairness, in doing so, I remove a lot of it, and I'm able to perhaps conveniently disregard huge portions of the Bible. Let me just wipe this in case it's a bit foggy. There we go. Sorry, weird angle for you guys there. Get down there. So perhaps that's a bit convenient, but I mean, I do genuinely feel that way. I feel it's possible to trim away a lot of fat. Anyway, I think what's fairly clear, to me at least, I do understand there's some debate on this, but I don't really think it's much of a debate. I think it's fairly clear there was a man named Jesus who had obviously a very profound impact on the world, and there's definitely a lot of debate to be had about how much impact he had on those around him and the world around him at the time. Clearly, obviously, as of today, he's had an enormous impact. This man, who was probably real, I believe was definitely real, he's had an enormous impact. It wasn't on the same scale at the time, and definitely it does seem clear that there was a kind of snowballing effect here. But there was a man named Jesus who well, I believe that it's clear that there was a man named Jesus who had a profound effect on people around him and amassed a following, preaching things that largely were quite different to things that those around him were preaching. Some of it seemed to contain more elements of kind of Eastern spirituality at the time, and notions of community, very, very distilled notions of community and love for fellow humans, and kind of I would say a kind of pacifism that was fairly distinct, and there might be some contradictions there, but a kind of pacifism that was fairly distinct relative to the times, and various other things. And it's hard to understand where all this stuff came from, and I think the fact that it stood out in that way is part of what's lent it its mystique and its pull over the years, is that it does feel different to the other stuff that sort of came from that period and that people were preaching at that time in that part of the world. And I know, again, there are some contradictions and misunderstandings there, and certain things that Jesus is quoted as saying that are conveniently left out of discussions. And there are different interpretations of Jesus, some as like a sort of political figure almost, like a political kind of rebel. Some as Bart Ehrman's theory is that he was an apocalyptic preacher, and there is a lot of that in there, which is a tricky one for me personally. Again, I can very conveniently write that off by saying I don't think he really said that stuff. I think someone else with their own agenda put that in afterwards because it suited them. And that, I do understand that would be a very convenient way of removing things that don't suit my narrative. So I have a variety of ways of looking at that, and I no need to go into all of them now. But yeah, regardless, there was a lot of stuff in there that has remained extremely powerful and as I said, distilled, very, very poignant and very, very clear and very. The message felt very pronounced, and in the context even of the Bible itself, it's very strange. I think it's you know, the large majority of the parts of the Bible directly involving Jesus very much like stand out in that context. They stand out as kind of a cut above, and they stand out as things that we can still relate to and understand and apply today. And I don't think there's so much of that in the rest of the book, and I understand a lot of people would disagree or perhaps even be offended by that, but that's just what I feel. Anyway, so what I try to do is I try to reverse engineer, in my own very sort of convenient for me way, I tried to reverse engineer what I think was really happening in those stories, what I think these quotes were really about, or what I think was really going on. And I can see in my mind fairly clearly the evidence of a man who existed who was profoundly spiritual and possibly more. I'm totally open to that possibility, possibly more than that, who, despite being misinterpreted, misunderstood, mislabeled, misquoted, despite his stories and teachings being embellished and altered and used as tools of manipulation, despite all of that, whose message still cuts through all of that, cuts through the context, the muddled and I would say, not to use this word in its recent modern sort of socio-political sense, but fairly problematic context that it's in. It cuts through all of that, really, for the most part, and it cuts through the parts that might even be self-contradictory. It just comes through, you know, loud and clear. And it doesn't matter how people try to rationalize it. It doesn't matter when we use our sort of logical, scientific, modern brains and we look at it from this angle or that angle, and we say, oh, but if he said this, how can it be this? And the Bible says this, and to an extent, it just doesn't matter. It just feels like something comes through, and there is an unmistakable aura around this man and many of his words and many of the stories about him. And there's a reason, I think, that they're so pervasive. And I know that there are quite valid, probably, like, historical explanations for this and sort of anthropological explanations for this, I guess, that would delve into how these stories were made to be so prominent in our lives, and how this figure was used, and how this figure has been sort of pushed on us, and that's why, you know, even today, I mean, you even read stories of people, many stories of this actually, people who are spiritual people who are into psychedelics, and they have experiences of calling upon, like, Jesus in times of need, or experiences of sin. What the fuck are you beeping at, you clown? What are you beeping at, you dildo? yeah, I've got a selfie stick. What, you've just been in a coma for 20 years? Doing a video, man. Like, so fucking what? My God, a guy filming. Fuck. Beep! I'm not on fucking TV, I'm doing a fucking YouTube video. Doofus. Anyway. One more. I think he's probably just being friendly, but still. Idiotic. I can't see anyone else who's beeping at. Anyway, whatever, sorry, I'm overreacting to nothing. So lost my train of thought. Beep, basically, that's what I was saying. That was the point I was making. Beep! That was what I was trying to communicate to you guys, and he actually helped me. No, so... what was I saying? Yeah, the people who don't even feel that they should or would have this connection to Jesus, and I feel that the respect for Jesus is kind of almost unanimous, and there's just a feeling that Jesus gives you. I don't know. I hear a lot of disrespect towards God. I hear a lot of disrespect towards religion. I never really hear it towards Jesus. I know it exists, it happens, definitely, but generally speaking, there is just a respect for Jesus, I think, that people have on a sort of innate level. Even when we're kids and we're sort of irreverent about everything, and most kids nowadays are atheists, and even when we're, even sort of, yeah, you get the sort of snooty Reddit atheists who think they've figured out everything because they've come to conclusions we were all capable of when we were, 14 years old. And they can be a bit nasty and snipey, but I don't know, it feels like everybody, or at least people as a whole, kind of just have this strange connection with Jesus. And again, you can explain this in so many ways. You can explain this as it's an image that's been pushed on us, it's an idea that's been pushed on us, and we have impressionable minds, and he's been presented to us as the sort of beacon of religion and our connection with God and spirituality, and therefore, there's an incredibly cute dog. I don't want to turn the film, it'd be rude to these people, but my God, this puppy is incredibly adorable. Hopefully you'll see him a bit from behind me when I walk past. But it's been pushed as this kind of, you can't really see him, never mind, as this sort of, and that's why this image is in our minds. That's why when that's why we think of Jesus in this way. That's why we have this connection with him. Maybe, yeah. I can see that. I can understand that. I personally don't feel that way, and I don't feel that conditioning has been as effective in any other ways. There aren't other things where I don't feel that impressionable. And there's something to me that radiates from these stories and from this man in a way that other things just don't, really. Anyway, so I tried to sort of, knowing what I know about humans and sort of corruption and deceit, which is a bit, I don't have any particular insight, but I feel I'm aware of, human nature and everything. And not just corruption and deceit, but, incompetence and stupidity. Those things are very real factors in all areas of life as well. I try to reverse engineer these stories, or think about maybe what they were really saying, or what really happened, or whatever. So one example is the story of Jesus dividing the bread and fish into, and the way we were told the story at school was people were hungry and they had, I forget actually, I think 2 loaves of bread and 4 fish or something. I don't remember the exact amount, it's not important at all. But Jesus had a very small amount of bread, a very small amount of fish, hundreds of people to feed. And the idea is that Jesus miraculously split this bread and fish and somehow divided it amongst everyone. The way we were taught this in primary school was he divided the bread and fish amongst everyone and they all felt full. And I mean, what can you take from that story? Jesus was magic. It's not the most interesting story. It doesn't really make any sense. It's fairly ridiculous, really. I mean, Like, if he could make them all feel full, why did he need to split the bread into tiny pieces? I understand maybe it was like metaphorical, even if it really happened. Perhaps he was doing this form of you know, magic, for want of a better word, a word with less sort of sacrilegious connotations, to show people, to bring this into the real world, into, you know, three-dimensional reality. But still, I don't know, that story doesn't really resonate in any way. It just, okay, he split some bread into tiny pieces and everyone felt full. I think what's more likely is, and I guess somewhat in line with the kind of sort of, I guess, as it pertained to the time, and in a way that it can't really pertain to modern times, with huge populations and cities and nations and everything, I think it was more in line with the sort of communistic interpretation of Jesus, which again I don't think means that Jesus would be a communist were he around now, but I think he was expressing at the time what was, in that context, a communistic, or at least, or necessarily, as a reaction to that context, a kind of communistic idea. And I think what he was basically saying was, it doesn't matter if there's, you know, how many of us there are, it doesn't matter that we only have this amount of food. We're in this together, so we're going to share this food, and we're going to divide it up, and we're all going to have a bit. And it doesn't matter that it's the smallest bit of food in the world. You're having a crumb of bread. It doesn't matter, because we're all equal, and we're all in this together. We're a community, and just because there's a small amount, it doesn't mean one person's going to have more than the other. You know, we sort of live together and die together, and that's how it should be. And I think in doing so, people, maybe they felt full in a different sense. They didn't feel full in terms of food, in terms of, you know, nourishment from food. Maybe people felt full spiritually. They felt fulfilled. They felt at peace with the amount that they had. They felt satisfied with this piece of food because of what it represented. It's like, okay, if this is what we've got, then this is what we've got, you know. I won't go walk around the school with my selfie stick, glasses and a cap on, walking around the local primary school. Anyway, so I think that's what the story was about. I think possibly even, and it was all completely speculative. I understand that. So, you know, I know there were people thinking this is just complete bollocks, you're making all this up. It's just my own feeling. It doesn't matter. It's just speculative. But I think that he sort of prepared this demonstration on purpose to show people this, to explain this notion to people. And it's just kind of been persistently misunderstood, perhaps by people that were there as well, because people were told, you know, this guy's amazing, come and see this guy, he's going to do these things, and he's going to, and people were like, I really feel full, oh my god, that's amazing, I'm actually completely stuffed. And like they just were placeboing themselves into believing complete nonsense. Or maybe it was both. Maybe there was an allegorical component to it, and a subsequent sort of again, for want of a better word, magical fulfillment of that allegorical promise. As in, you know, if you learn this lesson, you understand what I'm saying, and you learn to care for your fellow man, then I will make you feel full. You know, you won't be hungry because you're caring for each other. And perhaps there was some element of a real miracle in there, but it doesn't need to be. And I think, based on the other teachings that come through, and based on the charisma and apparent sort of wisdom of the man, if he was in fact just a man, I think it's clear that the story would be a bit, to me, the story was a bit more interesting than just, oh look, he made this tiny piece of bread, made me feel full. He must be magic, you know. I feel I feel that's an obvious bastardization of the story. So I try to think of the stories and the teachings in this way. I try to think I try to give Jesus of all the characters in the Bible, as well as all the characters and people who over the years have interpreted the Bible and left their mark on it. I try to give Jesus the benefit of the doubt more than anybody, I guess, is what I'm saying, because I feel probably on the weight of all evidence, Jesus has done more to deserve the benefit of the doubt than the other characters, or than other people who've been involved with the writing down and maintaining and editing and distribution of the Bible. So that's how I look at it, and I guess it's how I see it as an important text, and I see him as a very important figure. And I have other thoughts that are a lot more religious on the matter, but I'm totally open-minded. I'm not fixed to any one idea about it at all. But it's how I'm able to have that connection with it without having to wade into the depths of the parts of the text that I find unpleasant or unpalatable or just hard to really believe or get my head around. So yeah, that's all. Interested to hear you guys' thoughts, if you have anything, any thoughts on this subject. And yeah, that's all. Hope you're all doing well, guys, and thanks for watching as usual.